A-League attendances are very low, as we've seen recently. Everybody criticises it. Well, there's lots of factors to do with it, but I think there's three main ones. The first one of the three, I think there's not enough promotion and too much criticism of the A-League or of Australian football. It's never really promoted like other sporting codes are, and it really leaves you with a question, does the media have a vested interest in other sports? Well, Stadic's interview a couple months ago should provide some insight on that and issue an answer to any questions you may have.
All I hear is the greatest game of all. And the NRL people pump up their own sport all the time. I see Peter V'landys, he's an advocate for his game, he's passionate about his game, he's advocate for his product, and we don't do any of that. We're infighting all the time. We're like two seagulls fighting over one chip. We've got nothing and we fight over it.
So in that clip, Alan Stadic was talking about over-criticism of the sport by its own people. I know it was 2 months ago, it was last year, but I think it's obviously still very relevant. He was also talking about how much of a spectacle the Sydney derby was, and he was talking about how much potential there is for every game in the A-League to look like that. I mean, we definitely do have that potential. We've seen in the past, and of course for derbies and games like that and grand finals, how much fans we can bring. We've also seen in trial games against European teams like Wrexham vs Wellington and Wrexham vs Sydney FC. There was a lot of fans there. So there's definitely the fans, people who like football in Australia, just that nobody really seems to be coming to the games or really interested in it. And that kind of brings me on to the next problem, and I think this is the biggest problem. It's the kind of broadcasting and media side of it. It went from everything at Foxtel to fragmented into all these different sources such as Paramount Plus and Channel 10 and all of this. That's kind of why when the Australian Championship was on SBS, it kind of was celebrated so much. It was on free to air. The games used to be on Foxtel at the pubs and all that, and you could just go and watch it. And then when you take it off that, it just turns off all the casual supporters, and it really brings the visibility of the game down. Bruce Jitte describes this much better than I do on the Suited and Booted podcast, so we're going to play that clip and you can kind of see for yourself.
What do you think is the best play from here? It's a difficult situation, but
I just think there needs to be that long-term approach. Everyone needs to put their knives back in their little satchel, and really the game as one is much stronger. It is, because you'll have fluctuations. You know, there was a period where the A-League was absolutely flying, right? We all know when that was, 14, 15, 16, 17, around there, where, you know, you had Shinji Ono and Heskey and Del Piero, and crowds were strong and viewership was strong, and, you know, it wasn't as fragmented media landscape, so everyone had Fox. You could argue the A-League was stronger then, right? And now it's not as strong. You know, if you're all as one, you can have different parts of your business stronger than the other, but it all comes out in the wash. Overall, really strong. Grassroots is going great, yada, yada. When it's fragmented, then you can sort of leave a group out on the island. Like, that's a you problem, guys. You know?
So as you saw there, he pretty much just said what I said, except much better and more concisely. That's kind of the point I want to get across about the media landscape. Of course, in the same media landscape, there's the promoting other sporting codes more than football, because when football is promoted, it's only shown because of something like creative violence. And that brings us onto our next kind of problem. It's police overreach in football. I don't think this is as much as a problem as the other two, or at least our last one, but I think it is still one of the biggest problems out of all of them. Football can be perceived as violent because of the active support, because they're loud and they can sometimes be drunk and disorderly. In the essence of it, they're just expressing support for their team. And when you try and police football like you would a pub or a protest or a riot, because when you police a riot, you got to be physical, you got to kind of do all these things and treat them like you would a riot. And when you do that in football, what do you expect is going to happen? It's like goes full circle, it's a loop. You treat them like that can only result in tension and therefore violence, and that's because they're automatically assuming it. That's how over-policing causes smaller crowds. But how come they're automatically assuming this? Because you definitely see crowd violence in other games like NRL and AFL, so how come football has this kind of agenda against it? Well, we kind of have to delve into Australian football history a little bit for that. When European migrants came in around the 50s and mid to late 20th century, football and therefore footballers were automatically categorised a certain way because football, for the most part, came to Australia with the influx of post-war immigrants, post-war European immigrants, and they were usually associated as ethnic and unruly and un-Australian, and therefore footballers who came with the game were called that as well, and football was associated with that as well. This book here, Shields, Wogs and Poofters by Johnny Warren. It's Johnny Warren's 2002 autobiography and also the incomplete biography of Australian soccer. And it kind of goes into that issue about kind of the agenda against football because of the European migrants, and it's actually kind of behind the title. So this excerpt from the book describes this quite well, and I believe it is entirely prevalent today, so just listen to this. One only has to scan the national newspapers to get the feeling that the editors consider the sport a minor one and not worthy of much coverage, except, of course, for the occasional incident of crowd trouble where there is always a camera available and a reporter ready with a pen poised. The book goes into much more detail about that topic and also so much more, and it's just a great book in general about Australian football and about Johnny Warren. And it's definitely a must-read book for any Australian sports fan. So there's always going to be violence in sport, including football. And what we can do about that is we can condemn it and we can follow the law accordingly and issue bans accordingly. Don't use it as justification to scapegoat the entire sport of football as a problem.